As I mentioned earlier, in the Sanskrit, in the Vedic tradition, is referred to as mauna, M-O-U-N-A, mauna. Mauna is often translated as noble silence or noble sustained silence for a spiritual purpose. So that's exactly what we're doing this week, observing noble sustained silence for spiritual purpose. It's not unusual when we begin to observe silence, as we're doing now, that initially there may be a lot more thoughts that arise, a lot more turbulence in the mind. And it does settle down, I can assure you. But initially, part of the practice of mauna, and one of the most important features of mauna, has to do with what is called vichara, or self-inquiry, atma vichara, inquiry into the soul, or jnana vichara. Deepak used the term jnana, but meaning knowledge of the self, inquiring into the self. So this week, I'm in the awakening of the day each day. I'm going to recommend a number of inquiries for us to use as tools, to use as a point of inquiry. Now, most of the idea behind vichara, or often it's called swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is self-study. Most of the point around this is not necessarily, as we said when we were talking about the four soul questions, it's not necessarily to grasp onto an answer or grasp onto a concept. I love Ramana Maharshi's quote, where he said, the point of self-inquiry is ultimately to eliminate the questioner. That's something to contemplate. So inquiry, though, can give us a sort of a point of opening. And that's really what these inquiries are about, a point of opening. Because the mind wants to grasp. The mind wants to apprehend, like Deepak was saying. The mind wants to label and ultimately control in order to be safe. I mean, it all goes back to that idea of safety. So inquiry is about releasing that, that need to grasp. Because ultimately what we're inquiring about in all of these inquiries is I am. That's what it all comes to, the realization of I am. I am conscious. I am that consciousness, that presence. I loved his introduction about loving presence. To me, that is probably the best intention that we could have this week, because it's applicable to everything and every moment. Loving presence. So in the midst of loving presence, we do have a number of inquiries that I hope will be useful for you to give the mind something to do, at least initially, until the mind starts to fall away and I am is there. So in the Vedic tradition, one of the most profound teachings has to do with something that is referred to as the Purushartas. The Purushartas are the four aims of life. I love this subject. I love to share about it. I love to introduce it to people because this is a subject that is relevant for every moment of our lives, every single moment of our lives. And by sort of inquiring into these four aims of life and observing them in ourselves, we begin to understand what motivates us in any moment of our lives. So ultimately, the inquiry around the Purushartas is, what is a good life? What does it mean to have a good life? Everyone here, I think, has that desire in some form to have a good life. And so as we explore the Purushartas this week, and we'll be doing a little bit each day, one of the four aims starting tomorrow and through the rest of the week, much of this is about understanding what is a good life. But before we go into that, and we will go into that, as I said, each day, but I want to pose initially an inquiry for all of us right now. And I like to introduce this subject with this inquiry. It has a lot of relevance. And the inquiry is, why did I get out of bed today? Why did I get out of bed today? It's a very interesting question, and there will be a lot of responses, depending on what day it is, and different individuals will have different responses to this. But I'd like you to take just a few minutes, and in your journal, see if you can't relate to or respond to that inquiry. Why did I get out of bed today? Now, there may be simple answers like I had to have coffee, or I needed to come to this course, or there could be many responses, right? But whatever the response is, see if you can go a little more deeply into that inquiry of why did I get out of bed? And whatever it is that you come up with, think about why did you do that? What was that leading to? What was the desire behind that reason that you got out of bed? So let's just take a few minutes now and just and listen. There are no wrong answers. There are a million possibilities. Don't feel that you're limited to anything. Just let your mind kind of be curious. Why did I get out of bed today? Ultimately, why did I get out of bed today? Okay, hopefully you have a few sentences, a few thoughts. You began to inquire into some of the reasons why you got out of bed today. So I'd like you just to put that aside for the moment. We're going to revisit that before we finish today. But I think we can agree that whatever our answer was, whatever occurred to us, it reflected some kind of desire, right? Some kind of desire. Desire, in fact, influences every moment of our lives, as we'll see. So in the Vedic tradition, they've ingeniously categorized these desires into four specific categories, four specific areas of desire, which we're going to be able to explore this week. And as I said before, realizing this has been, it's been one of the great revelations for me, because in any moment of my life, I can stop and inquire which of these four desires is operating at this moment. And all four, as we'll see, are operating all the time, but our attention seems to go to one or another more in the present. And we're going to explore this. So if we didn't have desire, we might look a little bit like this guy and I don't mean to demean the slug kingdom, Because even slugs have desire. If you've ever seen a slug on the ground, they're going towards something really slow, but something is motivating them along. So desire really is, it's part of our lives in every moment. It's the reason we're here. There wouldn't be a universe if there wasn't desire in some form. We'll see this. So I love this quote from the Brihat Upanishads. It's, "You are what your deep driving desire is. As is your desire, so is your will. As is your will, so is your deed. As is your deed, so is your destiny." So it begins with desire. So in this Vedic tradition, as I mentioned, there are these 4 particular aims of life. But let's look at desire for a minute. It's desire that brought us into being from the spark between the sperm and the ovum. That's how we all got here. Desire has motivated us ever since being born, from beginning to crawl, to walk, to run, to speak, to write, all in pursuit of our desire. Right? Desire is the seed of every thought we think, every breath, and every step we take. Some desire. Desire underlies everything in existence. All creation is the fruit of desire. All doing results from wanting. So, again, in the Vedic tradition, they have these 4 sort of categories of desire. The first is the desire to live, ultimately to thrive, and to have a sense of significance or purpose, a raison d'être, a reason to be, a purpose. Second of these desires has to do with the material things that we acquire in life so that we can live our purpose, or we would say the means, the material means by which we can live our purpose, the stuff of life. The third has to do with, as we establish our basic survival needs and we have the means by which we can live our purpose, we want to expand our enjoyment. So enjoyment, we want to expand our enjoyment, and often when we expand our enjoyment, we look for significant others with whom to share pleasure. So that's the third aim of life, enjoyment, and to some extent, relationship. And the fourth of these desires, as seen through the Vedic tradition, is freedom. Freedom from constraints or limitations of the body. Freedom from limitations of the emotions. Freedom of the limitations of our own minds. And ultimate freedom from, we could say, the story of me. The story of me. So ultimate freedom. These are referred to in Sanskrit as the Purushartas. They are extolled in all the books of the Vedas, the great Upanishads. Deepak mentioned a few of them. The Rig Veda, for example, one of the great books of the Upanishads. And by the way, the Vedic tradition is the oldest coherent tradition that we have as human beings. It's vast, vast in knowledge. The Ramayana, another great epic among the Upanishads. The Mahabharata. Some of you have heard of some of these great epics, epic tales, teaching tales, really. And Deepak mentioned the Bhagavad Gita, as well as, we could say, the myths and teaching stories of every wisdom culture. Every wisdom culture had these teaching tales, these allegories, to educate people, ultimately, about some of these deeper truths. Joseph Campbell talked about the hero and the heroine's journey. Well, in fact, that's each of us. We're all on our own hero or heroine journey. And these tools, having to do with the Purushartas, are ultimately valuable resources for all of us in our journey. The Purushartas, the word Purusharta comes from Purusha, which often is referred to as pure consciousness, Purusha, which we may experience through our individual soul, Atman. And Artha means ability or for the purpose of. So the word Purusharta means for the purpose of the soul. So all four of these aims of life, which we're going to be learning about, have to do with the purpose of the soul. For what? The purpose of the soul, ultimately for awakening, our journey. So what are the four aims of life? In Sanskrit, the first Deepak mentioned this morning, Dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A, Dharma. Dharma has to do with what we could say is our moral values, not in a fundamentalist sense, as Deepak mentioned, but really moral in the sense that Dharma has to do with what sustains law and order in the universe. We'll more to say about that. I think of Dharma as how each of us in our own individual Dharma seek to align with our own nature, our own essential nature, whatever that might be, our own unique nature. And ultimately, through aligning with our own nature, aligning with natural law. Now, this is, by the way, sort of the substance of almost every worthy religion and spiritual tradition that has precepts, like the yamas and the niyamas, which Deepak mentioned this morning, or the various recommendations that every spiritual tradition has to guide people on their path, to act as a rudder so that we stay in alignment with our nature, with natural law. Because when we deviate, as we know, we're adults, we're not children any longer, we know that when we deviate from natural law in certain ways, we suffer, we experience resistance, we experience stress and illness and all manner of things. So the idea of Dharma is really to help us to navigate, to remind us of a rudder that we can count on. And ultimately, how can I contribute to the whole? Because Dharma is a lot about, once we realize our own nature, we want to be of service to others. We want to give our gifts and talents to others. So again, more about this. And the soul question, of course, which we do every day is, what is my Dharma? What is my Dharma? And Dharma ultimately is not a thing. It's not a particular activity. It's a state of mind, I think, a state of being, really, where we're always attempting to attune to natural law and thereby be of service to the universe. The second of the four aims of life is called Artha, A-R-T-H-A. I mentioned that word a minute ago, but Artha has to do, you could say, with our economic values, the things that we acquire in life in order to be able to live and thrive and ultimately live our purpose, execute our purpose. Artha has to do with prosperity and maintenance of that prosperity to a certain extent, and all of our resources, the stuff, the clothing, the shelter, the tools of our trade, whatever they may be, the money that we use. Deepak talked about money this morning. Well, Artha is specifically about material things that we acquire in life to sustain us. One inquiry around Artha is, what means do I need to support my purpose? We'll look at that in more detail because it's a very important question. What means do I actually need to support my purpose? It's a big inquiry. And one of the soul questions associated with Artha is, what am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? This is a very relevant inquiry for acquisition of resources. Because the more we put our attention on what we think we lack, the more we create a sense of lack. The law of attraction. The more we put our attention on what we have to be grateful for, our hearts expand and we very spontaneously attract more of the same. It's an extraordinary thing when you begin to see it happen in your life. The third aim of life is Kama, K-A-M-A, as in Kama Sutra. You may have heard of Kama Sutra. Kama has to do with our psychological values. It has to do with desire and pleasure primarily, enjoyment, relationships. One inquiry around Kama is what gives pleasure to me and to others I may interact with. Pleasure, very important. There aren't many things we do in life if we don't feel it at some point those things are going to bring pleasure in some form. So we're going to have a chance to look more into that. And the sole question around Kama is, what do I want? What do I want? The fourth of the Purushartas, the fourth aim of life, is Moksha. You may have heard that term. I'm sure many of you have. Moksha has to do with our spiritual values. And moksha often is referred to as self-realization or liberation. Freedom through self-realization or self-knowledge, awakening. And the sole question around moksha is, who or what am I really? Who or what am I really? First of our sole questions. So Dharma and Moksha, and I'm going to use the Sanskrit terms from here on, are we say the spiritual desires of the Purushartas, and Artha and Kama are the material desires. And we could say, and we'll explore this in more detail, that our life quest is about finding the balance among these four desires and reconciling them together. Very important to begin to inquire about this. Very important. And ultimately, it begins to answer the question, as we'll see, what is a good life? What does it mean to have a good life? So each of the aims, as I mentioned, is associated with one of the four soul questions. Dharma is, what is my Dharma? Artha, what am I grateful for? Kama, what do I want? And moksha, who or what am I? So Dharma, the word Dharma, is from the Sanskrit dhr or dri, which is often translated as to make firm or to establish, to support, that which sustains. So a big part of the description of Dharma is sustenance, what sustains. There is a universal Dharma referred to as Sanatana Dharma, because everything in creation has Dharma, as we'll see. And everything in some way, through its Dharma, contributes to the welfare of the whole in some form. The Dharma of a seed, we could say, if it has appropriate artha, if it has the means, if it has good soil and water and sunshine, the material things, will grow and ultimately will manifest its Dharma, which is to give its seed to, or offer its fruit, to creation. The sun has a significant Dharma, very important Dharma. The sun shines boundlessly and generously on everything and everyone. And the sun animates and warms and energizes and vitalizes. And, well, the sun, we could contemplate the sun a long time. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the sun. So the sun has its own Dharma, we could say, very important Dharma, because the sun, maintains the orbits of the planets in our solar system, each of which has its own Dharma. One of my studies for many years has been Jyotish, Vedic astrology, very different from what we think of as astrology in the West. Jyotish is a spiritual practice. It's referred to as a Vedanga, one of the limbs of the Veda. It's referred to as the eye of the Veda because it's all about the study of light. Jyoti means light. Isha means lord of or science of or the study of light. Not just the light of the luminaries, the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars and constellations, but the light, our own light, who and what we are, which allows us to perceive and to understand, to cognize. So the study of Jyotish really, you begin to really understand a lot more about the Dharma of each of these planetary bodies. I'm not going to get into that now. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating study. It really is. Really is extraordinary. It's changed my life completely. It's given me my life in many ways. And of course, all of the various planetary systems, all the many suns in the galaxy are held by a kind of Dharma. They're held by universal law, Sanatana Dharma. So Dharma exists everywhere and through everything in the universe. Ultimately, alignment with Dharma motivates us to seek authentic connection and union with the whole by playing our unique part in this grand divine play. And we all have a unique part to play. I know this is not a new subject for many of you. Many of you have inquired into the subject of Dharma. I know many of my clients in my counseling practice with Jyotish. I'm always so delighted when people ask me that question. They're not asking me, when am I going to get more money? Or when am I going to meet my soulmate? I mean, those are important questions, and they have to do with artha, and they have to do with kama, of course. And of course, we all want to, be able to align with those subjects. But I'm always delighted when people say, I really want to know more about Dharma for me. What is my Dharma? And that lets me know they're really at the point of opening in a significant way to playing their unique part in this grand play. Because we have to ask for Dharma. That's why that inquiry is so important. We have to ask. If we ask with a sincere heart, it will come to us. Somebody said to me one time, be very sure before you ask for Dharma, because it will come and your life will change. Because it won't be any longer about what's in it for me. How can I get more for me? It then becomes more about how can I serve? How can I be of service to the whole? We have to let go of the me through Dharma. So individual Dharma, we could say, we talked about collective or universal Dharma as Sanatana Dharma, but individual Dharma, we all have a relationship with Dharma. And it's called Sva Dharma, or Sva Dharma, Sanskrit, individual or personal Dharma, which is our drive to fulfill our unique potential. And we all have different potentials, you might say, to thrive and to positively affect creation. To positively affect creation. That's ultimately what Dharma is about. How can I contribute in a meaningful way, a significant way to the universe, a way that is going to be received appropriately, where the universe says, thank you, we've been waiting for you to play your part. So Swadharma has to do with seeking harmonious alignment with natural law, as I said. This is really what moral values really means. It's not a strict body of rules, but it's ultimately, I think any good religion, and this is an editorial comment, any good religion ultimately will take us to a place where we don't need it anymore, right? We grow up. We know what it means to align with natural law. We know what it means to behave with compassion and fair treatment of others, We know what it means to do unto others as we would have them, so on and so on. So really, in a way, Dharma is the path to bring us to a place where we're in alignment with the universe. And then we feel the universe supporting us in so many ways, supporting our desires, supporting just the littlest desire, because mostly our desires, the desires that we think are personal, are often not personal. They're the desires of the universe expressed through us. So when we're in alignment with natural law, we can kind of get out of the way and let nature fulfill its own desires. This is a great mystery and a great realization. But that's the path of Dharma. Dharma is like our rudder in life. And that's why it's always the first of the Purushartas, and really the most important, I think, of the Purushartas. They're all important, all important, very important. And ultimately, the spiritual values having to do with moksha is our full realization of who we are. So Dharma, Swadharma, is set in motion by our birth circumstances. The culture, the family of origin, our parents, our siblings, the language that we're brought up speaking, the mores associated with that culture, what is considered good, what is considered not good, according to the precepts of that culture. For some cultures, an act that might be considered to be against Dharma in one culture might be considered okay. That's a kind of a strange subject. But in any case, we learn Dharma from our birth circumstances, our early life. So we emerge into an environment. I was saying this to the group last night for the meditation refresher, that we're born into a particular specific environment, a room with lights and sound and maybe smells and temperature and all that. But we're also born into an extended environment or a greater environment having to do with, because we're not separate from this greater environment, even the planetary and celestial environment. It's part of who we are, part of our nature. So at birth, it sort of sets in motion. Of course, this is what the Vedic astrology chart is about, Jyotish is about. From that moment of birth, that birth time is when we see the trajectory of our lives going forward. And we see a lot of the talents, gifts, and abilities that each one of us has that are born with, very evident in the chart, and also where some of the challenges might be. And we all have challenges, especially at different times in our lives. So the birth circumstances really do set us in motion about how to navigate Dharma. Another Sanskrit term, apologies for the Sanskrit term. I shouldn't apologize for Sanskrit. It's such a powerful root language, but I'm not suggesting you need to remember all these terms. But prarabdha karma, has to do with, in the Vedic tradition, the karma that we're actually dealing with in this lifetime. What you might see in a Vedic astrology chart, for example, what is our race to run, you might say, for this particular incarnation? As I mentioned, Dharma has to do with our talents, gifts, and abilities, things that help us to navigate more easily through life, and in using our talents, gifts, and abilities to help us to overcome the challenges. Kriyamana and Agama karma refer to the karma that we create in this lifetime by our choices, by our actions. So, when we're in alignment with Dharma, we tend to, and we're mindful of Dharma, we tend to make choices that are going to help us to stay in alignment with natural law. Dharma requires different actions at different times of our lives. The Dharma of a child, for example, if you think about it, is first of all to get to know, what is this thing, this body? What is this? What is this space around me? What are these lights and colors and textures? And who are these people that are around? So the Dharma of a child is to really begin to explore the immediate environment and to begin to find out, is this a nourishing choice for me, or is it not a nourishing choice for me? Very important inquiry around Dharma, by the way. Anytime I say an inquiry, you might want to write it down. Not that it's so important, but it's something to contemplate. In any moment of our lives, if we're making a choice, we can ask ourselves, is this a nourishing choice for me? We will know. Our intuition will tell us, yum or yuck. It's not a nourishing choice. So the Dharma of a child and a baby is to really begin to explore the immediate environment, to find out, and hopefully the Dharma of a parent is to help guide the child, as all of you that are parents, to guide the child to make choices that are going to be more in alignment with natural law and choices that will not get them into friction or adverse circumstances with natural law. I mean, again, this is the precepts of every spiritual tradition, but also every family. The Dharma of a parent is to raise a child. Very important Dharma. And it's supported by nature. If you, as we've all seen, a mother with a baby, a little baby, you just want to protect them. You feel immediate love for that couple, that mother and child. So nature really supports that Dharma. A big part of Dharma is, first of all, learning to accept our own nature and letting go of resistance to what we're not, or being someone that we're not. Unfortunately, our parents and teachers in life, I think at the core, really want the best for us, but a lot of times they want us to be them. They want us to live their dream or live what they think of as their purpose in life. And I think that's one of the great aspects of Dharma, of being a parent, is to really allow the child to find out who they are. What is their nature? So in accepting our nature and acting according to, you might say, to our own wiring, being ourselves, whatever that means, and honoring our nature, all of our actions and choices become authenticated. We don't have to do something because somebody said, oh, this is the right thing or this is the wrong thing. We begin to understand what Dharma is for us, alignment with natural law. The ills of the world arise from being disconnected from a sense of higher purpose and meaning. That's not too hard to understand. Even cancer cells, we could say, for example, have in some ways forgotten their Dharma and no longer live in relation to the whole. So that's why we talk about health comes from wholeness. Because every part of the body has a Dharma in relation to the rest of the body, in relation to the whole. We could just remember every time that happens. I kind of like that sound, actually. I'm getting to like it a lot. So Dharma is preeminent and pre-existent everywhere in nature, as we've seen. And in any moment, we have the capacity, we have the ability, all of us, each of us, to inquire, is this choice of mine in alignment with Dharma? It's Dharma that inspires us to live as fully as possible. Dharma is always the first of the Purusharthas. And we're going to see over the course of the week why this is so important when we talk about the other Purusharthas. So I did give a little bit of an introduction to the four aims of life. You've got a little bit of an idea. Dharma is our moral values. Artha, more of our material resources. Kama is enjoyment. A big and important part of life is enjoyment. And we're going to go into this more later in the week. And finally, moksha, freedom. Freedom. So I'd like you to take out the list that you made at the beginning when I asked you why you got out of bed this morning. And maybe just take a few minutes to contemplate some of your answers and see if you can't apply them to these one or another of these four aims of life. See how they fit into this template of the Purusharthas. And as you're reflecting on your answers this morning, maybe you can even write a little bit more, maybe expand on those a little bit in relation to these Purusharthas that we talked about. How would one particular choice or one particular desire move you to one of the other four aims of life. And again, as I said, I'm not really wanting to give you something to do. This is not necessarily a writing assignment, but it's just an opportunity to inquire further into what motivates us, what is behind our desire. And maybe even during the rest of the day today, as you begin to observe yourself in silence, begin to observe what moves you forward, to begin to contemplate, which of these four aims of life is maybe a little more operative. And as I said, each of the days over the next 4 days, we'll go into each one of these individual Purusharthas, and we'll get a lot more insight, a lot more detail, and hopefully a lot more ways to apply these to our own lives. The point of this, of course, as Deepak was saying, it's not to give more information or to latch on to more concepts. The point is to really give us a tool to inquire into who am I? Who am I? And what am I? What motivates me? These inquiries are so important because ultimately they take us to the core. The purpose of Swadhyaya or Atma Vichara is to take us to the one the one who is, the I am, at which point the questioner is no longer there, no longer relevant. But that's not a goal, that's just the way it is. So, begin to consider these as maybe a little bit of a tool during this week, and we'll have other ways to apply these tools as we go along. So we're going to go into our first afternoon meditation now. If anyone needs to take a quick refresh break, it might be a good time to do it. We're not really breaking now because we have the precious time to do our meditation. But I'm just going to say, if people need to go refresh themselves, it's a good time to do it. If not, stay put, we'll be okay, and we're going to start in about 3 minutes or so.